All right, good morning. So what we're going to be doing is working on There Is No Turning Back. Our first ticket that we're going to be picking up here is No Turning Back 470. We're going to be implementing total supplies, total survivors, and any of the other variables that we need to implement inside of our game update request. So when I look here at my player, this is on my backend on ASP.NET, and we're using Identity Server 4 for the authorization server. We're using ASP.NET WebAPI 2.2, and then we also have a web app, which is made in MVC for core. So when I look at my player entity, one of the things that I have on here is I have these vanilla properties: experience, experience total, fairy points, and fairy points total. I'm also going to want to have one on here for like public, int, number, enemies, killed, just real vanilla ones. And then we also probably want to have let me check to see how that sounds when I'm typing. And then we also probably want to have a number supplies picked up, but we want to kind of have the number supplies picked up by like that. And then let's see, what other things do we want to include in here in our get? So we are going to capture now our experience, the total experience that was gained in that mission, the fairies, the fairy point totals, also because you can spend those, and then fairy point total, do I want that? I think you want fairy points at end. So fairy points at end, at game end. And then this one's going to be fairy point total. We don't need that. Number enemies killed, number supplies picked up. So I want to add in achievements here for killing enemies, and then also for seeing enemies of different types. We'll do that a little bit in a different way. And I think that that should be good. So now, since I'm using AutoMapper, I need to cascade this through my library file. So my first one are my DTOs for games. And I'm going to add in here a final score, final supplies, final survivors, final fairy points, experience gained, experience. So we'll do this. Now, if I change this file, this game DTO, I'm going to need to change my front-end models as well. So let me look here at... Okay, so this is a game, and I was looking at player before. So this is just fairy points and fairy points total. That was correct. And then you'll have number enemies killed, number supplies picked up. What other metrics do we want to capture? That's interesting. This is a new microphone, so I'm just still trying to figure it out. That's probably pretty good. And so in a game, I want to capture the final score, the final supplies, the total survivors, the final survivors, total survivors, final fairy points, time played, experience gained. And then I want to have... It's interesting, it's so staticky. And now I want to add on here a... number enemies killed, number survivors, number supplies picked up. Do I want to have anything else? Because this is going to be cumulative, which is going to apply to the achievements. Same thing with this one. I think that should probably be enough information for us to capture. Okay. So now what I want to do is look at my game as an entity, and I want to add in these. And I also want to look at my player DTO. And on this one, we want to add in your ads, buildable objects unlocked. Hey there, Flykin. How are you doing? How do people just pick up tools and build a site like React.js and so on? I'd love to build a little web application with those kind of cool tools, but I have no clue. Do you have any web development experience at this point? Okay. So we are going to want to have experience and fairy points total on here. And then we also want to have my number enemies killed, number supplies picked up. And that looks good. Okay, on my view model, we're going to change games and players. And so games here is going to have my experience. This is game, which is here. And it's going to be all of these plus total survivors, final fairy points. It's interesting that's not capitalized. Experience game, number enemies picked up, number supplies picked up. And that means that we'll also want to change the DTO back to the final fairy points. And that's because we're using the auto mapper. I mean, I know it, but no real experience with those tools. Pick up Angular CLI. That would be a good first language to pick up. How's the sound quality? I just recently got a new microphone, and I'm doing something a little different with the sound. Okay. That looks good. And if I look at player VM, we want to change this one here to be experience total, fairy points total, number enemies killed, number supplies picked up. And then the last place that we need these are in the requests. Let me check responses real fast. That looks fine. So if I look at the requests here, under games for game update request, we want to have the number enemies killed and number supplies picked up. And then the next one is our player. Which I don't think I have one in here that needs this. Okay, so now that all of my properties are set, we need to look at the services. And in here, I want to open my service called post game, create game, update game. So in this game, this is now going to be, my request here should have something called, at the end of a game, should have final fairy points like that. And that looks right. So here, we're going to assign the new properties there. And then we also have, whoops. And then we also have in here final fairy points. We got that. Total survivors. We got that. Experience gained. We got that one. We need to have my number enemies killed. And then my number supplies picked up. Okay, so that means that you're a little loud, but more echoey. Okay, let me turn this down. But to be honest, you were echoey before. How's that? Is that any better? What if I was to kill that, add that one in, and add that a little bit up? How is that? What is Angular? What does it do? Angular is a JavaScript framework. It's made by Google. You can make web apps with it that do lots of functionality. It uses HTML, CSS, or Sass. It's really a great first language to get familiar with it. No difference in the echo, but you sound better. The echo might be my room. So here, on my player, I also want to do a update player count for enemies and supplies. And we're going to do here a player dot number enemies killed. And yeah. We're going to do a plus equal to my request dot number enemies killed. And then we're also going to do a number supplies picked up. And then I want to do a context dot entry of my player dot state is modified. Okay. So now, maybe if I did this, it would lower the echo. Is that any better, or was that worse? So now, on update game, the next one I wanted to add was on player. I want to add in here a number objects built and a number objects destroyed, and we'll do a number survivors saved. And are there any other ones that we want to add in here? Oh, that's 100,000% better. Almost no echo now. That's great. Is Angular hard to do? I never really touched HTML, nor do I want to. HTML is pretty easy. You'll get used to it. It's not that hard of a language. You're mostly creating a skeleton. Is Angular hard to do? I really never touched it. No, and the tutorial that they give for Angular, this one, Angular Tour of Heroes. This will just step right on through it. So one note about this is that Angular is a client-side language. So if you're using like search engine optimization and you want the search engines to crawl your site, it really won't be able to because it's JavaScript. And it's injecting the HTML via JavaScript at runtime, and so the crawler doesn't pick that up. So you want something server-side for that. But Angular's still a great first language to learn, in my opinion. So let me think, are there any other things in this game that you would do? We could have a number of missions completed. We don't have that yet. We could have the number of items seen, the number of that, the number of survivors saved. We've got the total number of fairy points here. I don't think we need anything else. So I'm going to bring this one from player into game, which is over here. Okay, and now I'm going to bring that into the DTOs, which are the data transfer objects. So the first one here is in my library DTO for games. We want to add it in here. And then we also want to add it into the player. You don't need this in game because you already have it. So we can remove it from game here. Okay. And then we need to change the player DTO. Which is here. Okay, that looks right. Now we need to change the view models for games and players. So in player, we're going to add in these. And then in game, we're going to add in these and remove number of survivors saved. Finally, in my game update request, we want to add in here I feel like I'm spelling enemies wrong. Yeah, there's no E here. So we'll just do a search and replace on that and remove the E. Okay. And then we want to add in here under game my number enemies killed here. Okay. So now that I have all of those, when I look at my service, we need to add them in here. So let me open game again, just over here. And in here we want to add in my player dot number enemies killed plus equal to my request dot number enemies killed. We already have that one. We have number supplies picked up. We need number of objects built. We need number of objects destroyed. If I look at player again, the other things that I need to add on to this are looks like I'm adding all of this player stuff here. I'm also adding here the experiences and the experience total. That's right. Fairy points total doesn't change. number enemies killed, number supplies, number objects built, numbers destroyed, and your number survivors saved is going to be equal to your request dot total survivors. And then you'll save that object. All right, now we're ready to crank on the front end. So I'm going to leave these two up, and we're going to take a look at the front end models. So in No Turning Back, our game, I need to first open up my libraries here and open up my games. And on here we want to have these: final score, final supplies, final survivors, final fairy points, experience gained. Now I need to have a public int called number survivors killed, and then I want to do a public int called number survivors picked up. Oh, number supplies picked up. The public int for the number of objects built. The integer for the number of objects destroyed. We also want to look at my player and change that one. And this needs to have the experience total, fairy points total, and then you have the number enemies killed, the number supplies picked up, the number of objects built, the number objects destroyed, and then the number survivors saved. Okay, now knowing me, I probably also created requests or responses for this. So this is a game get response, that's fine. That looks fine. Under requests, we probably have one here called a game update request, which needs to have on it final supplies, final survivors, final fairy points, experience gained. And then we have number enemies killed, number supplies picked up, the number of objects built, the number of supplies picked up. I feel like I just did that one. Number objects destroyed. And that should be it. Number objects destroyed, number objects built, number objects picked up, number objects killed. You probably also have a player update request, but I don't think so because I think all that's generated from the server. So that's probably it. Now in my service, one thing I forgot to do was here. If I look at my game over here, I also need to assign a couple of properties here. So we have final score, final supplies, final survivors, final fairy points, experience gained, number survivors, number enemies killed, number supplies picked up, number objects built, number of objects destroyed, and that should be it. Okay, so let's update my database with this new change. So we'll set my WebAPI as my startup project and then go into the package manager console and do a add migration on the correct project, which is the code first. And I want to say it's called added additional parameters for game and player. And we'll create that. Okay. It says my build failed, so here, when I'm doing my create shop purchase, what I'm doing here is I'm updating my ferry points like that. Same thing here. Same thing there. And then we'll look here at ferry points at game end and change this one, which is from a purchase. We want to do ferry points total. And then the other place where this is being assigned ferry points is when you create a purchase here. Yeah, you're doing it already. And then here you're removing your ferry points to continue. So that looks right. Okay, let's look at my error list. It looks good, and we'll add my migration. And now we'll do an update database. Now if I look at here, ferry points is correct. If I look at my data transfer objects, that looks correct. Let me make sure of that. If I look at my request for a game here, final ferry points, yeah. That looks right. So I already updated the database, so now we can just go ahead and start up the back end. One thing I'm going to change is I don't need my web app to start up in a browser, so that's good, and we can go ahead and start the back end. Now that we've modified our requests and responses here on the front end, that looks good. That looks good. Now what I need to do is populate them. So where I'm submitting the game, that's happening here in my HTTP manager. Here, I should be posting the game somewhere. Here, post game final. And here's where I need to populate this. So we need to have my final ferry points is my, and I guess it would be the player.ferrypoints. Or is it in the, when you're removing ferry points, it's happening in the global. So it's a global manager.playerdata.ferrypoints. Okay, the next one is number enemies killed. So that's going to be in something called player.number enemies killed. And we'll add that in a moment. Same thing with objects built. With my objects destroyed. The number of supplies picked up. Okay, total survivors is player.total survivors, and your total supplies is player.total supplies. Okay, so now when we open up player, I need to have these as static. So we'll add them down here before my events. And I'm going to say public static number enemies killed, which is an integer. Okay, we're going to do the same for each one of these. Okay, and now when we init my player, which only happens one time, at the top here, we're going to go ahead and assign these to be equal to 0. So it always starts over at the beginning of every level. Or every game. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is populate them. So I'm inside of player, and I want to say that we have one in here called collide with item. This only gets invoked from one place. So if I look at change score, it's happening in 29 different places. So I don't think that we necessarily want to do it here. I thought my player had somewhere in here which was a movement coroutine. So if I look here at my movement coroutine, when I'm checking for items, which is higher up here, check for item collision. Right here, you're overriding this if you're the player. So let's go ahead and move this into a notepad for just a moment. And then I'm going to copy this method and bring it into player as an override. And so now for each one of these, I could just do a base.check for items collision. And pass in the waypoint. And then here, I can just do this, where we're going to change the score for the player. And then I want to do player.number supplies picked up plus equals to 1. Or we'll just do plus plus. So that one's done. The next one is number of enemies killed. So that one, we want to look at my death event, which is in Game Manager. And we have on here a on death event. So here, this is if my object dead is a blocking object. And we want to do a player.number blocking objects, number of objects destroyed, plus plus. And here, if it's a player, otherwise here, if it's a base NPC, then I first check to see if it's a zombie. And here, if all of this is done, then I want to say right here, if my damage source is a moving object, then here, if it's a type of player, then I want to change the score. So if the object dead is an enemy and the source is a player, then I want to do player.number enemies killed plus plus. Do you guys hear that static too? Okay, so now, there we go. So now that I've got my enemies killed, my objects destroyed, supplies picked up, let me make sure of this. So we've got number of supplies picked up, number of enemies killed, we got the number of objects built. No, let's do that. So here on player, when I have a create buildable object, I want to do a number buildable objects built plus plus. Okay, we got the number of enemies killed, right? But not the number of objects destroyed. So up here, we got it. So the last one is we have a survivors and we got supplies already, right? Yeah. Total supplies. Why do you have total supplies? What does that signify that's different? This is the total number of supplies that you have acquired. So we need to do that one too, and survivors. So if I look at my movement coroutine here, you should have somewhere in here called a check for survivors while moving and check for survivors. So this is if it's a vampire. So you don't get any saved survivors for that. And here, this is a regular survivor. And here, we want to do a player dot number survivors plus plus. And you also want to do the same thing here. This is total survivors. And then the last one is where you had your check for items collision. Here's the override. Good. You also had one called check for items while moving. So we'll do that as an override as well. Which is going to be a base dot check for items while moving of my waypoint. And then here you want to do your total supplies plus equal to your item.scorePoint object value. And that should do it. That should be all of the different fields. So now we can test it. It's only going to submit those at the end of the game. So let's play a game and test it. Give it just a second, first one of the day. Okay, it loaded. Everything's running correctly. We're going to start the game. Now it looks like I currently have the keyboard disabled, so let me correct that. Under the regular game manager called update computer input check. Okay. So now the input's working. So let's go ahead and start the game. We're going to pick up some supplies here. And start. It says it could not communicate with the server. That was interesting. On my create buildable object. So let me look at this. On my web API, under my controllers for games, for players, you have a create buildable object. Here. Let's test it again and see what's going on with that. Okay, we got a problem going on there with the offline, but let's see why it didn't take. Go ahead and pick up the supplies to get started. Okay, we're going to post a buildable object. It says it could not communicate with the server, and then it's not firing. So let's see what's going on with that. If I look at the back end, is everything running on this? The identity server is running, the web API is running, and the web app is running. So now we're going to take a look at the HTTP manager for where you're posting your buildable object. You're posting to 58228. Which is 58228. We're posting to the path called buildable. Which is under games map objects buildable. So that doesn't look like the right post, right? Because that's to create a new buildable object. So we want to look under the map objects controller for post map object buildable. We'll try it again here. Okay, it says it couldn't communicate. When I retry it, it says it still can't communicate. Buildable games, map objects, buildable games, map objects, buildable. I mean, that looks right. So let's stop the back end. And what I'm going to do is open up my database. And we're going to go to the identity server and the no turning back here, and we'll delete it. And then I'm going to set up my startup app and do a update database. And then in the front end, underneath my HTTP manager, I'm going to change my access token login to this one. And then I'm also going to tell it to post all my objects out to the server. As soon as this is done, we're going to reload those objects and try it again. Now maybe it's failing because if I look at my buildable objects database, it has a torch, so it should be fine. So here we'll do an if my global manager.player data does not equal to null and my global manager.player data.player abilities does not equal to null. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the backend now. We need to start all three of them, not just the Web API. And now I'm going to run the front end and post out all the objects. We'll be able to watch them post here. Purchasable items are done. So we can double check this by looking at the database. For purchasable items, and everything's been written successfully. Wait for this to finish. Almost done. Shop items, I think, is the last one. So now we can go back into the game and we can undo what we did on the HTTP manager. And we can try to run it again. Should load. Start the game. Start the game up. Okay, we're going to go build an object now. Now it acted like that worked. But it never posted. Did it? If I look here at my map objects, here they are, buildable objects IDs. So they are getting posted. Try one more time. I just aren't getting any breakpoints on it. That's weird. I wonder why I'm not getting any breakpoints on that. So we can break here though on my post. Buildable. We'll do it here and here and attach. And we'll do another buildable. There it is. It's going to send it out. It says it's not a web request error. Everything looks fine. What did it return back? If I look at my download handler, yeah, it looks fine. So it's just not debugging, which is weird. Okay, whatever. So it's working. So now we're going to go end the game. I'm going to pick up a few more supplies. And then we'll die. I don't need all these breakpoints. I'm going to get out of the way, bat. Okay, so we died. It should now submit my game. And it did. And now I'm going to look at my games. I see total supplies got populated. My number of objects built got populated. My number of objects destroyed got populated. My number of supplies picked up got populated. Total survivors looks fine. Final fairy points looks fine. Final supplies is 0. Final survivors is 0. And your final score was 1525. So I believe now that ticket is complete. If I look at my player, I should see that they have this much experience, this many objects built, this many objects destroyed, this many survivors. It looks like everything is working. So what we're going to do is go into source tree, and I'm going to make a commit here of just this stuff. And then also we'll use my database snapshot and this stuff. We'll add these migrations. And this stuff, I don't need to add it. So we're going to go ahead and do a commit here on no turning back 470. And my time was 55 minutes, and my comment is added many different metrics to be collected for play and game. And we'll commit it and push that out. What I can now do is discard my changes. and get rid of my new files. And we're going to look at my development branch. And I'm going to merge 470 into it. And we'll push that out. And so on the board, we finished 470, so we can move this over, and we can see that I have my Git rollup here. Doesn't appear that this is updating. And if I look at my Git rollup now, we can see my one commit. And we can look at the rollup here. Okay. And then what I want to do is we can move this over to be completed. And the next one we're going to take is 487. So back over here, I'm going to do a branch for no turning back 487. Okay, so for this one, what we need to do is we need to change some of the diversity of the starting characters. So if I look at my scriptable object here underneath well, it's going to be inside of the tutorial, right? And then I want to change where on the second map of the ferry. So let's take a look at that. You should have in your map tutorial underneath scriptable objects, map system, map tutorial. You should have on here make ferry. So if I look under objects, I see the ferry here. And this is my interact, home scene and world interact events. When we complete this, we're going to have this player survivor event. Okay, let's go to the game manager where we change the maps. Called on-map player event. And we're going to go to my next map. How do you have those little notes over the lines saying when you last edited them? Hey there, Zuris. That's from using Professional. Visual Studio Professional. Okay, this is going to send me to the next world. So I believe in worlds you have a go to tutorial. Go to world tutorial, which gets called from here. So it's got to be in your, when you do this, you create the individual maps. So map 2 should have the survivor right here, tutorial survivor character. This is what I'm looking for. So this is on my ferry scriptable object, which is here. And we currently have them set to this item supply survivor. No, that's the audio object. We have them set to character 656. So if I look at my sprites underneath resources and then skins, we should have a, no problem. We want to pick a different character to be saved. So I think he's a heal character, and I think she's a fireball character. So she's character 3-7. So if I go look up here for my characters 3-7, character 3-6, that's a napalm character. We don't want to give them that one. That's too strong of a character. Let's pick another one. Could pick a basketball player. That wouldn't be a bad idea. If we go back and look at her, she's the heal character. Let's use her. So she's 3-2. Here. And we want to say that she is a we're going to go ahead and add her onto the ferry here. Which is here under ferry. And we're going to change out my 3-2 with 5-6. And that should be it for this ticket. So if I go back into the title and I start it up, I want to look here for my post process camera, which is using this post process profile. I don't even see where that's being populated. Well, let's go ahead and continue. And we want to run the tutorial. That's annoying that it's detecting an interactable object when the player is started. There we go. And so now we've corrected this. Okay. The next thing I want to do is, if I look at my home under post-process camera, it is using this one. So I'm going to move this into post-processing here, and then delete this folder. Okay. And the next thing is when we create a starting character. So in my game manager, where we first create the player, start player, we should have a check for interactable objects here. Here, get interactable objects. This is being called, if it was a map change, that's on a map change, that's fine. Let's look at all the different places where this is. This is after you use an item. This is after you move. This is on your last OK event. So let's take a look at what's happening here when we attach this. Okay, we need to now enable the breakpoint. Now you're going to get your grid object conflicts, which are none of them. Okay, you're getting one here, which is your chair. And then you're firing your interactable item event. So that's correct. So let's go start the tutorial again. So it's after this OK event. So on your ferry, when you're getting your OK event, If I look here at my dialog, last OK, well, that's not correct. So it's happening on an interactable event. So if I look at my UI script, on interactable event, here, let's take a look at what's happening here. So when we okay, it's not interactive, it should turn off the button, but it didn't. It didn't turn off the button. So the reason it didn't turn off the button is because this needs to be game object. Let's try it again. No, we don't want to do that. When you changed it to the game object, that actually really screwed it up because of the way. So when we look at my interact button script, how many lines of code are in Game Manager? 2150? 2,150 lines? That was supposed to set everything to be inactive. Let's try it again. How many separate scripts do I have? I don't know, a lot. That's the only way I can answer it, is a lot. The game has a lot of stuff in it. Fair enough. There's most likely a script and a scriptable object for most everything in the game. Okay, so right now it's setting everything to inactive. but it didn't do it. So on player movement event, set buttons active. Oh, this is why. This is why it's happening. If I get rid of that line of code, it should be fixed. And now it's fixed. Okay. So now that that's done, we can go back into here and I can commit here to no turning back 487. And we're going to say my time was, 20 minutes. And my comment is, on the board, what we were doing was modified starting, modified character provided in tutorial to provide greater diversity. Also corrected interact button incorrectly showing active at start of the scene. And we're going to go ahead and add in the fairy asset here, the game UI script, and that's it. Okay, now I'm going to remove the unneeded files and reset these. We're going to push out the change. Look at my development branch, and we'll merge 487 into it and push that change out. Now on the board, we can move 487 over. And what I want to add here is a new bug, which is warning. We're going to say unique message if version is not correct and application requires an update. And we'll add that onto my current fixed version and assign it to me. And we'll bring it into the sprint. So now we're working on 484. So over here we'll do a branch for no turning back 484. And we will push that out. Now, one thing I wanted to change was over here on the back end, I wanted to add in here under player we want to have number chests opened, and we want to have that same thing on the game. And then we also want to have that on the view models and the view model for the player. And then we also want to have that on the DTOs for the game and on the player. And then we also want to add that onto the game update. And we're going to add a bit of code here in the service for when we are saving the game. Right here. And I want to say my game dot number chests open is equal to request dot number chests open. And then in here I want to say player dot number chests open plus equals to my request dot number chests open. And we'll select my web API and do a add migration, and we're going to say added number of chests opened. And I'll do an update database on that. On the front end, underneath my library for game, we want to have a public int for number chests opened, and then also on the player. And then we also want to have that on the requests for a game update request. And in my HTTP manager, I should have my post game final. And here we're going to do number chests open equals player dot number of chests opened. So we'll look at here, we'll add it in. And now when I look at my blocking object, underneath scriptable objects, blocking object, chest, this is my interactions. And I want to do a player dot number of chests open plus plus. And that's it. Let's go back over here, start up all of the projects again, and play it. Now on this ticket, we want to add a warning that a purchase can override a previous purchased item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a short break. I'll be back here in about 13 minutes. If you have any questions, a great time to put them into the chat. Also, we have a Discord, which is up to over 330 developers or so. That's at discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com. All these videos are available at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com, and I'll see you guys in just 13 minutes. Thanks for staying with me. Enjoy the music.